When working with materials inside Redshift, it can be quite useful to actually be able to animate some of the values of that material. However, Redshift doesn't give us the ability to do this by default, so we have to go about it in a little bit of a roundabout way. So I figured we would take a look at how we can do this. I just have our Redshift set up with a camera and a light dome in here. Let's actually go to the light dome and drop the exposure a little bit on this. Let's go ahead and create our geometry. So we're going to use a shader ball just to illustrate this technique. So let's just kind of frame this up. Call that good. Let's create a material as well. And we'll go over to our material and create a Redshift material builder. Drop that in. And let's go back and just set that as our material of our shader ball. And we are pretty much set up. Now for a visualization here, we're going to create a max on noise. And we're going to wire this into our diffuse color. And let's change the noise to, let's do this Zeta. It's got kind of a cool look to it. Now to start off, we do have this animation setting right here. Now this is specific to the max on noise. So you can actually use this if I bring up our Redshift render view and I move to frame like 50. You can see as I change this setting, it is kind of evolving the noise here. As I scrub our timeline, you can see that it is moving as well. But if you don't want to use this or you don't have access to this, you're probably going to want to use the offset, or if you want to change like the scale or something, then you're going to want to go about it using this method. So I'm just going to set this off to the side here, and we'll go back to our object level and we're going to set this up. So to do this, we need to create some attributes. So we'll just do an attribute create, and we'll go ahead and wire this up. So start off, I'm just going to set up a scale here, and we'll leave this as is. We'll set this value to 1, and we'll create a keyframe by Alt and left clicking. And then we'll go forward to frame 60 or so, and let's set this to maybe a value of like 6. And we'll Alt and left click there as well to create our keyframe. If I go over to our geometry spreadsheet, you can see how it's being animated across, which is awesome. That's what we're looking for. But we need to set this in our noise here. So we need to create a point attribute, and we want to set this to the same attribute name that we created, and we'll wire that up into the global scale. And if I go back to frame 1, bring over our render view here, just to reset it, you can see that we got it just the way that we had it. But if I move forward, nothing changes immediately. That's because we have to refresh this. And as soon as I do, you see that it changes the scale of our noise here. So that's kind of the general concept of all of this. Now there is one little problem with this method, and that is some of these settings like the type, and if I go over to our emission weight doesn't actually have an input here. So we kind of have to go about this in a little bit of a different way. So I'm just going to create another set of noise here, but I'm going to change the color here. Let's change it to maybe like this pink. And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy all of this. Move this down. And I'm going to change the type here. I don't know, something like this cranial. And then let's go ahead, change it to like a green. Now we have to use a different method for this. So if we want to actually, let's see, if we want to have some emission here, we want to have no emission. Actually, I'm gonna undo some of this. I'm just gonna get rid of all of this, and I'm gonna recopy this. So if I want to actually have some animated emission on this, I could, if I wanted to use this scale attribute just to reuse it here, I could just do an RS multiply and multiply these values together. And if I set this emission weight to a value of 1, gives us some emission. As I wire this in here, set this to our emission color, you see it does give us something here. Now this is a value of, let's see, a value of 5 point whatever right now. Let's go all the way to where it's a value of 6. Now, we do have emission on this, but it's not the same as if we were to pump in our emission color and go to a value of 6 there. It is a little bit different here. So we have to kind of go about this in a little bit different way if we want to animate our emission weight. So I'm going to set this back down to 0. And I'm going to wire this up into our emission color down here as well. And I'm going to set this to a value of 1. But I'm going to go back into our scene view here. Oops. And go over to our object. And we're going to create another value here. So we'll call this emission. And our emission weight is a value, or is a float, but we're actually going to be doing a blend between these. So we'll do rs blend for material blender. And if I look here, we're looking for a color. So if I go back to our attribute here, a color is essentially just a vector. So we're going to create that, and we should be all set there. Let's go ahead. We'll set the keyframe there, and then let's go ahead and set these to a value of 1 across the board. Oops, I just created a keyframe on top of that. Let's create another keyframe there, and it looks like that didn't undo like it was supposed to, so let's just set this back to zeros. And now you can see we have some animation going on, and I missed this last one like a dummy. There we go. Now we have an animated value. This is just going to be grayscale because it's the same value all the way across. So if I want to take a look and just double check, if I come into a color here, so I drag this across, you can see the RGB values are going uniform across, which is what we essentially want. So I'm going to wire this in here, and I'm going to go to our color here, and I'm going to wire this into our layer 1 color. And let's see, did I set this one to emission? Let's set this to like 6 there. Now I need a point attribute, and we're going to set this to the emission. This is going to be basically an emission blend. So if I pump this into our blend color, you can see that we have a emission value of 0.3 here. So if I go back to that, like frame 62 is close enough to 0. I refresh this, see that we have no blending going on, so it's going to be this value of 0. I go further along here to where it is a higher value, and I refresh. You can see that we now have this sort of a animation type thing going on. So I lower this. You're going to see that it's slowly blending between the two because they're the exact same. So you'd want to create copies of these. So since they're the exact same, other than this emission weight, it's going to do the exact same material, but it's just going to be animating the value that we have set, which is kind of a cool concept. So that's how you would animate any sort of attribute inside of Redshift. It is a little bit of a roundabout way of going about things. I wish that they would make it so you can just animate them inside of the materials here and not have to go about this the way that they're making us. But it is what it is. This is how you have to do it for now. It does work in the render view for some things, which is super weird if you scrub across the timeline, but other things it doesn't. You'd think that it would be able to be possible inside of the final render as well, but I digress. That is how you would go about animating anything inside of Redshift. I have a bunch of other videos on my channel on stuff inside of Houdini, as well as Redshift, some stuff on Cinema 4D and Clarice as well. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure you check out those videos. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and have a good day.